Welcome back. The Homeland Security Department has a lot of eyes on its procurement projects at its components and across the entire agency. That might be part of the problem, according to the Government Accountability Office. Marie Mack is Director of Contracting and National Security Acquisitions Issues at GAO. Marie, thanks very much for coming on. Looking at your work, and I confess that I am a little bit confused by all the org charts and lists of who has procurement authorities across the department. Clear up for me what the core of the issue is that you looked at here.
Thanks for having me today, Francis. But let me explain a little bit about the role of the component acquisition executives. I'll call those CAEs. DHS invests billions of dollars in major acquisition programs, such as systems to help secure the border, increase marine safety, screen travelers. Those all help them execute its many critical missions. Most components in DHS, such as the Coast Guard, the Transportation Security Administration, Customs and Border Protection, they all have these CAEs, and those are senior acquisition officials that are responsible for oversight of the acquisition programs and the processes within their own components. This oversight includes, for example, representing the organization at department acquisition review boards for major acquisitions and ensuring programs remain within established cost schedule and performance baselines. But what is also important to know in terms of context, typically there's one CAE per component, like I mentioned, the Coast Guard, the Border Patrol, TSA, but the Management Directorate is a little different. The Management Directorate is actually located at the department level, and it includes department-wide offices like the Office of the Chief Information Officer or the Office of the Chief Financial Officer. That area, that Management Directorate, actually has 5 CAE positions for the different areas of responsibility. So that's a little bit unique. And then in general, the Management Directorate also has oversight of acquisition programs that are a little bit broader and affect more than one component. So we looked at 4 component CAEs and then all 5 of the Management Directorate CAEs.
So regarding the Management Directorate CAEs, you write in this work, DHS indicated the direct reporting relationship of acting CAEs to the DHS Chief Acquisition Officer makes designating CAEs in the Management Directorate through this process unnecessary. Is that on the mark or is that off the mark, do you think, Marie?
They chose not, I think it's off the mark. They chose not to follow the own process. And this is where one of our primary takeaways focused on CAE oversight. They did not follow their own process for filling CAE positions. And it was primarily in the Management Directorate that had this issue. 4 of the 5 individuals filling the CAE positions in the Management Directorate did not go through that completed process of vetting candidates' qualifications against criteria. And then you formally designate those selected individuals in writing. This is important because if the individuals that are holding those positions, they're conducting the oversight of big major acquisitions. And if they're not necessarily qualified to do so, there are ways for the DHS or the components to identify mitigation steps, such as training or ensuring CAE has experienced support staff to help the actual CAE perform that role. And in this particular case, I think what we found is that the CAEs doing the oversight function because they didn't go through that process, you have no idea that they were actually qualified. Another important area about qualifications that may come into concern is where one of the qualifications we looked at was where the CAE role was not necessarily the primary function for those filling the CAE position. Specifically, some of those CAEs may hold concurrent positions that create the potential or the perception for conflict of interest between acquisition execution and acquisition oversight. What I mean by that is if an individual is responsible for the day-to-day execution of an acquisition, that same individual should not be responsible for performing oversight of that execution. Now, since our review was not a compliance audit, we didn't identify specific instances of this conflict of interest, but we did find that the potential exists. And I can give you like a hypothetical example.
Sure, that'd be great.
For example, the DHS Chief Information Officer is the acting CAE for their office, for the Chief Information Office. They exercise leadership and authority for all information technology acquisitions, all the systems within the department that are IT related. That's an execution responsibility. That position puts them in the chain of command over acquisition programs in their organization with the goal of getting those capabilities. And a lot of times in typical acquisitions, folks tend to get it as fast as possible. I need these things as fast as possible. But when you're acting as a CAE, which is an oversight responsibility, they're also responsible for overseeing acquisitions with a focus on following good acquisition management practices, where, for example, schedule may not necessarily be expedited. And cost is another potential one that we're always concerned about when we look at acquisition programs. Let's say an individual that's filling concurrently an execution position and a CAE position. From an execution perspective, the individual may approve incomplete cost estimates in order to maintain program affordability in the short term. And they would approve this incomplete cost estimate. But from an oversight role, they are not addressing GAO's best practices necessarily for developing credible, accurate, well documented and comprehensive cost estimates if they approve the cost estimate before it's completely done appropriately.
Marie Mack, thanks very much for coming on. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.